Iranians will continue to live many years after the Epstein class has destroyed America.
Do you think there's a danger in flying too close to the sun with this kind of response?
The idea of changing Iran's government is a pipe dream.
So you admit that they have been attacking hotels?
Exactly, because they're legitimate military targets. They have been attacking office buildings as well.
Iran may not be the baddest guy in the region, but when Iran has had a chance to flex its muscles, it hasn't always been, a very great moral actor.
Some of them were questioning why their parents and grandparents kicked Americans out of Iran. And now they're not asking that question because they're hearing American-Israeli bombs every few hours in Iranian cities.
Is there something that the Iranian government could have done in the last 47 years to kind of avert this?
Dealing with the Epstein class, they like to kill little Iranian girls and rape little American girls.
Do you think Iran needs a nuclear bomb?
Trump has managed to turn a new generation of Iranians as anti-American as their parents were.
Let's get going. Izadi, when you're ready, you can count me down and you can start the graphics and stuff, and I'll start. Hi, good day. Welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. I'm your host, Ishfaq Kareem, and today I'm joined by Foad Izadi. Foad, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Foad is a professor at Tehran University. He's speaking to us on what's day 13 of the war on Iran, the war by US and Israel on Iran. Iran has obviously retaliated to the very many strikes on its country by Israel and the USA that have, among other things, killed Ali Khamenei, who's now been replaced by Mujtaba Khamenei. About 1,400 Iranians have been killed that we know about. There's also been strikes on Lebanon. Death reports there are 700 Lebanese have been killed. As we also know, Iran has retaliated by hitting key infrastructure, US bases, and some bombs have even hit civilian areas in Israel and in other parts. A lot of that, what the Iranians say, is because when a lot of these missiles and drones are shot down, then debris falls on cities. But there's also been attacks on airports and on hotels. Foad, just before we get into all of this, how worried are you right now that this war will get out of control?
It is out of control. We didn't need to have this war. I don't know if you saw the interview of the Omani foreign minister. He spoke to CBS News in the United States, saying that an agreement was available within 24 hours, his words. And he said that Iran was able to give concessions that Iran was not able to do in 2015. He basically begged the Trump administration not to start a war, and Trump started the war less than 24 hours after that interview, which is understandable because on the first day they said that they want to change Iran's government, and you don't enter a diplomatic solution with the government that you want to change. The idea of changing Iran's government is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. Trump has single-handedly managed to unite Iranians more than any Iranian politician could do, but they were not interested in settling this issue. They wanted to attack Iran. They killed 165 little girls on the first day of attacks when their school was bombed by American Tomahawk missiles. They have hit hospitals. Netanyahu, before starting the genocide in Gaza, called Palestinians Amalek. In their twisted ideology, they get to kill women and children of the people they label Amalek. He called Iranians Amalek last week. So they want to repeat the genocide in Iran. They hit every single school, every single hospital in Gaza. And they want to do the same thing here. They are attacking hospitals, civilian infrastructure. We had forecasted rain the other day, and they attacked oil depots in Tehran just a couple of hours before the rain, so they could create acid rain. They did. We have 15 million people in the city of Tehran. Polluting the water system in a city of 15 million is a war crime. They have no ethical limitations. They have hit scores of civilian infrastructure. So the country is going through a very difficult time. We are dealing with the Epstein class. They like to kill little Iranian girls and rape little American girls.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned that Israel has called Iran and Iranians Amalek. The Iranian Red Crescent has reported that there's already been 69 schools in Iran that's been hit, 25,000 building units, 19,000 of those are residential units. That's a lot of bombing already. Not all by Israel, a lot of it by the USA as well. There's a lot coming here. You mentioned that they weren't really interested in a diplomatic solution because when there was a diplomatic solution on the table, then that's when the bombing started. Now, this isn't the first time in the last 2 years since, this is the third real big attack on Iran. The previous one was the 12-day war. Before that, there was an attack as well. It's been clear that this has been coming for a while. There's two schools of thought. I mean, you've probably heard about this in your various interviews and reading. The one is that Israel has dragged the US into this war. Israel is interested in degrading the state of Iran, and the US have kind of had to come along because if they don't, then eventually when Iran retaliates, they have to strike, and by then they would be in a weaker position. The other is that actually the Americans are completely on board with the Israelis on this. They too want to still degrade Iran's military and nuclear facilities and create some sort of regime change. What's your thoughts on why this is happening?
I think both statements are true. Israelis have been wanting to attack Iran for many years. Netanyahu was interested in using American soldiers to fight his wars, and the Trump administration was foolish enough to be fully on board. So both things are true. We have had the Israeli lobby influence in Washington for many decades now, but this is not normal. This level of submission of the President of the United States to the Prime Minister of Israel. It could be because of the Epstein files. Mossad probably has some videos on Trump. It's difficult to explain why you would want to give the decision-making of U.S. Foreign policy in the Middle East to the Israeli Prime Minister, because Netanyahu is making the decisions. And this is not normal. This was a war of choice, Netanyahu's choice, Trump's choice, and it's not going to achieve its goals. But this is the situation we have. So I think both statements are true.
You seem to be giving more credence to the fact that this is Netanyahu dragging Trump along. You've mentioned also that that he may have some dirt, alluding to the Epstein files. Why do you think this is Netanyahu more than it is Trump? I mean, have there been indications? I mean, Trump did. He's always, I also tend to agree that this is Israel dragging it. I'm not sure if he actually has dirt on Trump or if he's convinced Trump that joining this war will be good for his ego. There's a chance that he can gain a quick victory, and Trump, maybe doesn't have the deep understanding to realize just what a folly this was and is. Just tell me more on why you seem to think that this is a lot more Netanyahu dragging Trump.
Yeah, we know that Netanyahu has been wanting to attack Iran for many years. We know that. That's an established fact. We know Trump has this Islamophobic tendencies, very strong. He hates Muslims. He hates Muslim countries. And we know that he has this ego that makes him vulnerable to people like Netanyahu if they know how to play with that ego. And when you have these two individuals as the President of the United States and Prime Minister of Israel, then you get this unnecessary war on Iran. So it's beyond just Netanyahu. We had Lindsey Graham talking about taking over Iranian oil the other day. He was saying that the US will be controlling 31% of oil reserves. He's adding Iranian oil plus Venezuelan oil. He was talking about having leverage against China. So this is beyond Iran. We understand these things. The United States is interested in having leverage against China. It's just Trump. It's the U.S. political establishment. So these things are all true. You don't have to pick and choose. You can have it all of the above. So this is the situation we have. Netanyahu taking advantage of a weak president who's delusional, taking advantage of a country in decline. They realize that they're falling behind China, are interested in having some sort of leverage against China, and taking advantage of the Western media outlets going along with whatever genocide they want to engage in. So this is a combination of many factors.
Okay, now, I mean, we've discussed Iran's response, well, at least I've discussed Iran's response, and the response has been, let's just attack all the Gulf countries, let's attack U.S. assets in Azerbaijan, in Turkey. Obviously, that has had civilian.
I don't agree. I don't agree with this.
Why wouldn't you agree with that? It's clear that
Iran has. No. Iran has not attacked Azerbaijan or Turkey, and Iran has not attacked these countries. Iran has attacked U.S. bases in these countries. It's unfortunate that these countries have given Americans bases, but when a country is attacked under Article 51 of the UN Charter, it's called the right for self-defense.
There was Iranian missiles being intercepted by air defense systems in Azerbaijan and Turkey that were heading. That fair enough, we're not heading to civilian infrastructure, but we're heading to either US either pipelines or key US bases. And you denying
US
that?
Bases is true. US bases is true. Hotels
in southern Turkey.
True.
Southern Turkey, US bases.
When you evacuate a hotel,
no, but when you're saying it's true, just
legitimate military target.
Okay, before you get to the hotels, so you're saying it's true that there was a Iranian attack at a U.S. base that's in Turkey. Eventually, it wasn't successful because it was intercepted.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the Iranian government has denied that. There were fightings in the Kurdish areas of Iraq. It could be a missile either on Iranian side or the other side that fell on the other side of the border. That could be possible. But Iran targeting Turkey or targeting Azerbaijan, not true. You saw Tucker Carlson, the American journalist, saying that the Israelis in Saudi Arabia and Qatar are trying to sabotage places. Mossad agents were arrested so they can blame Iran. Netanyahu was successful in getting American soldiers to fight for him. He wants to do the same thing with the Saudi soldiers and Qatari soldiers. So it's more complicated than the way you are wording your sentence.
I don't deny that it's complicated, and I'm sure there are Mossad agents in Doha and Riyadh, but also the Qataris also arrested people who are being agents for Iranians inside Doha. So I completely understand and I agree that Iran is not the aggressor here. The US and Israel are. They are bombing a lot more civilian targets than Iran. I'm just saying that there's clearly an Iranian response, and it's debatable whether it's the extent that it's hitting.
Article 51 of the UN Charter. It's Iran needs to make sure that the other side pays enough price. So Iran is not attacked every few months by two nuclear
No, I don't disagree with that. Let's just unpack the Iranian response. So you said that they're hitting military targets in the Gulf, and you said that when you evacuate hotels for them to house soldiers, then those become a military target. So you admit that they have been attacking hotels.
Exactly, because they're legitimate military targets. They have been attacking office buildings as well.
Okay.
CIA headquarters, that's legitimate military target. And please remember that these countries are shooting some of these missiles that creates debris. Iran cannot control where the debris falls.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. UAE
I just wanted to get the clarity on that.
On fire because of the debris, not because of Iran hitting it.
Okay, but what I want to try to discuss is just so there's bombs flying, from Iran, missiles, drones into these areas. What you're saying is for U.S. bases and hotels and office buildings that you are saying are legit military targets. At the same time, the Straits of Hormuz have been closed. Qatar has stopped producing gas. The Saudis can't move their oil. The oil prices, and this is all intentional so that Iran can show that there's a cost to all of this, right? Do you think this is the question I actually want to ask? Do you think that while I can completely see that there's the logic of this response, do you think there's a danger in flying too close to the sun with this kind of response? Because, the US and Netanyahu specifically is not going to back down. And And it seems like Iran can't back down, because if they do back down, then you're right what you said. Iran becomes sitting ducks, where every 3 months the Israelis can go and bomb what they want. So it's a quagmire, and that's what I actually want to speak about. How do you think the Iranian government needs to manage this quagmire?
Iranian government needs to make sure that Iranian borders are stays the same. We had reporters asking Trump if Iranian borders will be the same once he's done, and he said probably not. They want to disintegrate Iran. They want to take over the oil-rich sections of Iran. They want to have Israeli domination of this region, and they want to use the oil and gas from this region to have leverage against countries like China. So this is bigger than Iran. And if you are an Iranian official, what would you do? This is what Iran did previously when General Soleimani was illegally assassinated in Iraq. How many American soldiers were killed? Zero. When Ismail Haniyeh, the heroic Palestinian leader, was assassinated, how many US soldiers were killed? Zero. After the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, zero. After Iran was attacked in June, we lost over 1,200 civilians. How many US soldiers? Zero. The people who exercise restraint are no longer with us. The new leaders in Iran need to make sure that the other side pays a price, both in terms of the number of American soldiers dead. It's sad, but that's how wars happen, and financial costs. And so that is going to be Iran's priority. Whether that's flying close to the sun, or where the sun is, where the moon is, these are not Iran's priorities. Iran's priority is to make sure that the country can manage its territorial integrity, and Iran can manage the future of the country, making sure that the country is not disintegrated. This is good for Iran. This is good for the region. You remember how Netanyahu talks about Greater Israel. That means Saudi territory. That means Iraqi territory, Syrian territory, Jordanian territory, Egyptian territory. Iran is not interested in territory of these countries. We understand they are going through discomfort, but the alternative, an Israeli hegemony, would be much worse. So it would be good for these countries, for Iran not to fall, because if you get rid of Iran, they will be targeted next. You had the American ambassador in Tel Aviv saying the same thing. One of the goals of this war is to create an Israeli hegemony. Israeli hegemony is not good for anyone.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and I do agree that consistently Iran has its integrity, its territory has been degraded and has been infringed upon and has been bombed. But again, I mean, just when you come to the discussion on flying too close to the sun, if the U.S. doesn't back down, because Israel is not going to back down, so the U.S. doesn't back down, when will enough be enough? Because it kind of seems like I completely empathize with the position here that the U.S. is the aggressor, and they are bombing Iran, and they are bombing Iranian infrastructure, and they are breaking international law, and they are looking to deplete Iranian oil assets and everything else. But if this just continues, the cost eventually rises. The cost eventually rises for Iran more than it does for the USA, because a lot more civilians are dying in Iran. There could be American troops in Iran, which they'll have a very difficult time. But there will be troops that will further impact civilian deaths and deaths to actually Iranian forces. They may be funding militias at some point. So if this just continues, I mean, where's their endpoint? Like, what's the and you mentioned there's a new government. Yes, there isn't a new government as such. There's a new leader. The IRGC and the government is still intact. And naturally the leadership will be more emboldened now, specifically because Mujtaba Khamenei was, his father was killed by an Israeli airstrike. So that in itself, gives incentive for the leadership to push on. So when will enough be enough in the event that the Trump administration doesn't back down?
What is the other choice that Iran has? The other choice is to surrender. This is what Trump is asking, total surrender. And Iranians are not going to surrender. There's a lot of more fight left in Iran before any of that. Iran is going to need two things before Iran can stop. One, Iran needs guarantee that Iran is not attacked again. Trump can come and say that, or write a statement, or do whatever he wants to do. but Iran needs to make sure that these type of attacks on Iran every few months stops. This is the last one, and Iran needs to get paid for all the damages that Americans and Israelis have done. It could be done through leveling tax on ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz by countries who participated in these attacks on Iran, or creating some regional reconstruction fund that could compensate Iran for all these damages. This is how it's going to end. Trump is going to realize that he has made a huge mistake. Then he's going to declare victory. Then Iran needs to see those two things that I just said. Then this can end. Otherwise, you're going to see a Strait of Hormuz closed for at least 6 months. And Iranians are going to resist. Iranian soldiers are fighting for Iran, and they're fighting for this region and the civilized world. American soldiers are fighting for Israel and the Epstein class. Iranians can stay in this war much longer than the other side can.
Okay,
and Iran welcomes the presence of American soldiers on Iranian territory because they're much easier to hit than F-35s.
Okay. Again, I hear everything you're saying, and I see the logic of it. But again, it just sounds like there's two ships that are heading for shore here, and neither ships are letting up, and it could be quite destructive. But I see the logic of what you're saying, and I see that what you're saying is that Iran, because it's facing an existential crisis, it's in a position to take a lot more loss.
There is no alternative for Iran.
Okay. I mean, you're a professor at Tehran University. I understand that you teach communications. You've also studied in the USA. Try to give our audience, and I mean, we don't have a lot more time left in the discussion, but try to give our audience just a sense of what the psyche of Iranian society has been like, in the 47 years of the Islamic Republic, specifically how they view the West. And given the fact that the US has imposed sanctions from the beginning, they armed Iraq quite heavily, that resulted in a devastating war in the 80s, and ever since then there's still been sanctions, and there's been various nefarious activities against Iran. A big part of that was the Iraq War. Give us a sense of how Iranians perceive, and obviously it's not one thought, but how, for example, the students in your class, how they think about the USA and how they're responding to this war.
Before these wars, this is the second one, we had students, people in their 20s and 30s, that some, not all of them, some of them were questioning their parents and grandparents about why they were so anti-American, because they didn't see the Shah, they didn't see Americans in Iran during the Shah's time, the violence that they created, the dictatorship they supported, the political prisoners they helped to torture. They did not see any of that. They did not see the plunder of Iran's resources. The Shah stole $20 billion when he left Iran. This is according to a Washington Post report in 1979. They didn't see any of that. So young people were always some of them were questioning why their parents and grandparents kicked Americans out of Iran. And now they're not asking that question because they're hearing American-Israeli bombs every few hours in Iranian cities. They're not asking those questions. Trump has managed to turn a new generation of Iranians as anti-American as their parents were, and something that Iranian government could not do. There is this culture of resistance here. People know who Netanyahu is. People know who Trump is. Nobody wants to be foot soldiers for these people. People understand what's going on, and they're going to resist. Iran has a very old civilization. Invaders and aggressors have come and gone. Iranians will continue to live many years after the Epstein class has destroyed America.
Okay, I've mentioned that there's a new Khamenei in charge. Mujtaba, the son of Ali Khamenei, is in charge. You mentioned that young people who were not aware of America's view on Iran and didn't understand the prior injuries that America has placed on Iran are now aware, and so they have this much more anti-American sentiment. But at the same time, the regime is deeply unpopular in Iran. It has
not
been
true. Not true.
I mean, I'm not.
Not true. This is Western media propaganda.
There's definitely resistance and opposition to the Iranian government. It may not be increasing. It's probably decreasing. It's probably decreasing due to the bombs. I agree with you.
True.
But from 2009, there's been various protest movements, and there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the government. I mean, just recently there was a crackdown, and at least 5,000 people were killed.
Not true. Not true. These are exaggerated numbers.
5,000 is the minimum number. The exaggerated numbers are things like 30,000.
That's even more exaggerated.
No, 100%. I agree. I think those are exaggerations, but that's what I'm saying. The exaggerating numbers are 35,000.
Is an exaggeration. No. Listen, Iranian government. You're a good journalist. I don't see you, but I hear you. Iranian government published the names of every single victim of the riots we had in January. And Trump or Netanyahu or BBC or CNN or Middle East Eye have not been able to add one single name to that list. We had riots that were organized by Mossad. This is not my analysis. This is what Mike Pompeo said, sending Mossad agents on Iranian streets New Year greetings. This was designed to create demonization of Iran so they could attack Iran after 2 months. That was the purpose of those Mossad organized riots. We lost about 3,000 people. 2,400 out of those 3,000 people were lost on our side. 200 police officers. We had these Pahlavi people trained by Mossad going to shop owners and telling them they will be killed if they don't close their shops. Pahlavi had declared a general strike, and we had people who were shot in their shops because of not listening to Pahlavi's ask for general strike. So Iran was a victim in January. Iran is a victim now. Mossad is creating these scenes so they can justify attacking Iran.
Okay.
If this is the truth, now you can have an option of believing it or not. That's up to you.
Okay, no, Foad, I mean, I find it extremely hard to think. As you said, 3,000 people were killed and 2,400, so 80% of those were on your side. I find that very hard to believe. I find it very hard to believe that the Iranian state that has a very strong police presence, that has IRGC, took such a bashing that 80% of the people killed in what you call these riots. That's very hard for anyone to fathom. I don't disagree with you that I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you that there was foreign interference. I don't disagree with you that there was stoking of violence. But I'm also saying, in addition to that, there definitely is also organic, people who really dislike the Iranian government. There's issues over corruption. There's issues over a bad economy. There's issues over the fact that the government has been there for 47 years. There hasn't been so. But I mean, I think we can agree to disagree on that. But I think it's hard for anyone looking at this to think that there were street riots and 80% of the casualties were people who were standing up for the government and not protesters.
I didn't know we are going to do a debate today, but just think about it. That when you lose 200 police officers, police officers in Iran are armed, right? So how can you shoot police officers? The reason was that the Iranian government did not give permission for these police officers to use their gun, because they remember what happened in Libya. They remember that the other side, Mossad and Israelis and Americans, want to increase the number of dead so they can do another Libya in Iran. So they could use that number to attack Iran after a few months, which they did. So if you don't have to admit this now, but later on, just think about it. How can you lose?
No, I mean, look, I do think that
come up with a good answer to that.
Fuad, I do think I don't think the fact that 200 police officers were killed, which I agree with, means automatically that the vast majority of those killed were also people who were pro-Iranian government and not protesters. I think there can be a world where a lot of people are killed. Unfortunately, 200 of those people are Iranian police officers, but it doesn't mean 80% of the casualties. But look, I think we need to move. I don't think we can agree on this. Let's move this discussion along.
we had ordinary citizens, not pro-government people, ordinary citizens shot by Mossad agents so they can increase the number of deaths. When I say 2,400 people, it includes ordinary citizens that were
I
shot.
understand that that's
Okay,
what you mean.
let's
I'm
move
just
on. We
saying
cannot move
I
on.
just don't think that's very fathomable. What I want to ask now is right. You mentioned that Iran is now they have a ship that's moving in a certain direction, and that the direction is we're going to try to hurt the U.S. as much as possible because the U.S. are intervening. The U.S. we are the victims in this war, and we to try to hurt them, and hopefully they'll stop. And the U.S. and Israel on the other hand are moving forward, and they want to try to steal Iran's resources. They want to try to degrade the society. They want to try to potentially harm the borders, change the government. And this is going to lead to mutual destruction. Do you think? And I mean, this is I think is a bit of a very important question. That we are at this moment now, but is there something that the Iranian government could have done in the last 47 years to kind of avert this? Not in the last 5 years or the last 10 years, where there's been a nuclear treaty and then Trump tore up the nuclear treaty. Not in that period, but just this positioning where the Iranian government has decided that they're going to dig deep since 1979 and view the USA as this enemy. I understand that the CIA was responsible for a coup against Mossadegh, but do you think there's another direction they could have taken to sort of avert the fact that we are now heading to this unfortunate, inevitable potential war, which could be very, very, it's already occurring, but could be a lot more destructive?
The number one foreign policy priority of the governments in the last 47 years has been to lower tensions with the United States because they realized that Iran was valuable to the United States. They realized that they thought that Iranian oil reserves belongs to them. And they invited American companies to come and do normal business. They had all types of projects in the last 47 years trying to get the Americans realize that they cannot go back to the Shah's time. They cannot plunder all the resources. But the Americans were not interested. The last instance was just a couple of weeks ago. They started the war against Iran. They were not. They have not accepted an independent government in Iran. They think Iran belongs to them, and they want to take over Iran. And no matter how much the Iranian government has tried in the last 47 years to make them realize that that's not possible, Iran is going to remain independent. You cannot bring back another Pahlavi in Iran. Even Trump acknowledges that he's not popular. He's looking for someone more popular. Uh, this is an issue of hegemony, and an American hegemony added to an Israeli hegemony. They want to take over Iran. By taking over Iran, they think they can take over other countries directly or indirectly, and they want to control the resources of this part of the world to put pressure on countries like China and other independent countries. So either you get these through facts, or you start asking the questions that you asked. That why didn't Iran do something? Iran has done a lot to make sure that we don't reach to this stage. It's unfortunate that we have, and Iranians are going to make sure that Americans are going to get defeated. You can talk to me in a few months, and we'll go over these statements again.
Okay, you mentioned that there's a few times when the Iranian government actually tried to invite American companies over and try to get them to say, hey, let's work together so that you can have some profit from our oil as well. Just tell me more about that. Tell me and the audience more about that.
Yeah, we had Hashemi Rafsanjani. This is right after the Iraqi imposed war on Iran that all these Persian Gulf states paid for. Uh, uh,
So this was after
because this
the
was an era of
88 war, the
reconstruction.
80 to 88 war. That war?
This is, yeah, 1980, 1988
Yeah.
war. So Hashemi Rafsanjani was Iran's president. They knew that Americans want to do regime change. There's nothing new. Even at that time, they wanted to do that. So the idea was to invite American companies, oil companies, to come, and they did not do the normal bidding procedure because there was a political component to it. So they wanted to bring in American companies. These companies benefit from Iran's oil wealth, and these companies, in the opinion of the president of Iran would become Iran's lobby in Washington. And that didn't work out. American companies came, actually. They came in because Iran is number one in terms of oil and gas. But then you had the Israeli lobby, which is stronger, destroying that project. Iran's oil and gas went under sanctions at that time. We had this foolish senator, Alphonse D'Amato, who was a Republican from New York. He sponsored the bill sanctioning American companies for engaging in business with Iran, oil companies, and then giving oil companies of other countries a choice whether they wanted to work with the US or Iran. Given the fact that US's economy is much bigger, they went with US. So Iran's oil industry came under sanctions at that time because Iran's president wanted to resolve Iran-US relations tensions. And we have had these instances numerous times, and none of them worked because the United States wants to take over Iran the same way Iran belonged to the US during Shah's time. They want to bring, some of the people in Washington want to bring Shah's son back. If he was more popular, that would have attracted more attention. He's extremely unpopular in Iran. But this is the type of people we are dealing with. They like to bomb and kill little Iranian girls and rape little American girls. These are the type of people we are dealing with.
Okay, just before you go, thank you for your time. It's been very generous. I want to just deal with two more things. So the one is nuclear weapons, and the other is China. So, I mean, yes, the IAEA, all international bodies from outside have said that, before this attack and a long time before that as well, have said that Iran is a long way from gathering nuclear intelligence. And they did also say that, Iran was complying a lot with the deals and treaties in place. Despite all of that, I mean, do you think that Iran, especially you can see what's happening now, as a deterrent, do you think Iran needs a nuclear bomb?
Countries that have a nuclear bomb, the US doesn't attack them. So there are a lot of people in Iran, especially after the recent bombings, are asking this question, that why shouldn't Iran have nuclear weapons? It's not illegal under international law to have nuclear weapons. It's illegal if you're a member of NPT and you can leave NPT. We have had countries that have done that. So that's a big question in Iran. But with regard to Iran's nuclear issues, since you're a good journalist, you go to dni.gov, Director of National Intelligence, published a report a couple of months before the June attacks. This is Tulsi Gabbard. The video is available online. She presented the consensus of the US intelligence community. It's called the Annual Threat Assessment. And it says three things about Iran's nuclear program. The first thing, it says that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. The second thing it says is that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon program. And the third thing it says is that Iranian leaders have not decided to have a nuclear weapon program. And when they asked Trump before the June war, when they asked Trump about that report, he dismissed it. And he went with Netanyahu's version. Netanyahu's version is that Iran is going to have a bomb in 6 months. And he has been saying that for the last 20 years. So when you're dealing with people like that even don't accept the assessment of the US intelligence community, because they're not really worried about Iran's nuclear program. If they were, they would not, Trump would not have left the 2015 agreement. Under that agreement, Iran had to limit its enrichment to 3.65%. You cannot find any nuclear scientist that would tell you can make a bomb out of 3.65% enrichment. And Iran accepted extensive inspections. The best way to make sure that Iran doesn't make a bomb was to have that agreement or something similar to it. They were not interested in that. They want to take over the whole country. They're going to fail.
Okay, you mentioned again, that the U.S. have been playing unfair, and they've been playing unfair for a while, and that Trump has lied about the nuclear weapons and everything else, and you've doubled down on the Epstein class and the fact that this is a country that likes to bomb children and rape children. I don't disagree with that assessment, because yes, we've seen in Gaza and we've seen in the school now that little children are killed routinely by both U.S. bombs and Israeli bombs, and we all know what was in the Epstein files. missiles, right? Although that's not necessarily a state operation, but it does cast a lot of doubts on that. But Iran's actions in Iraq and in Syria in the last 10, 15 years have also not been quite stellar. You've armed militias that were supportive of Bashar al-Assad. You've aided him. He killed a lot of Syrians. What is your thoughts of that? Iran may not be the baddest guy in the region, but when Iran has had a chance to flex its muscles, it hasn't always been, a very great moral actor.
Iran needed to make sure that Syria is not taken over by American and Israeli proxies. Unfortunately, Iran failed. You have this guy, Jolani, who is an American asset. This is not my assessment. This is what the US representative on Syria said 4 years ago, long before people knew him. The American television, PBS, published this documentary, and James Jeffrey is the name of the man. 4 years ago, he said that Jolani was an American asset. And he's working with Americans. Trump likes him too much. He uses perfumes on him when he visits the White House. I guess he doesn't like the smell, but he likes him. Israelis like him because he has provided Syrian territory to Israel without any problem. And having a puppet of the United States in Syria is much worse than having the Assad government. And Iran wanted to make sure that Iran's link to Hezbollah continues to be available. It's no longer available. That's why you're seeing over 700 Lebanese killed in the last 10 days. The fall of the Assad government was not good for this region. It's going to lead in Israeli domination of this region if they can get away with the plans that they have with Iran. So Iran, we knew what the Assad government was. It was a Ba'athist government. These are not Islamically oriented people, but at least they were not puppets of Israel and the United States.
Okay, look, I mean, I didn't expect you to go as far as saying, the fall of the Assad government was bad. I think there's Syrians throughout Syria were extremely happy that Assad regime, which was extremely brutal, that killed tens of thousands of people in jails and hid them away, hundreds of thousands of people when you actually include the casualties from the war. And I mean, while I obviously it's clear that Jolani has reached agreements and a relationship with Israel. This is maybe the question I was trying to ask earlier, that surely we live in a world where one has to kind of deal with your enemies and at the same time placate them in the hope that you can grow stronger in some way. Do you think that applies to what's happening there, or do you think this is not what's going on there?
Having an Israeli domination of this part of the world is not good for Syrian people. Is not good for Saudis or Qataris.
I mean, there's many Syrians in Damascus now who are feeling not living under Assad regime, and they don't feel that they are being. I mean, they can hear the Israeli bombs landing a few miles from Damascus, and that's very unnerving for them. I mean, I'm sure they're not happy about that. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean Israel's bombing Syria. That's proof that Israel has a problem with Syria. And they want to weaken the Jolani government to make sure the state can't be stable. This is why they're bombing. If they were allies, they wouldn't be bombing. So I think it's something that's a bit of a juxtaposition what you're saying.
That's not correct. They're bombing Jolani's opponents. They want to make sure that Jolani stays in power. And they like weak states.
They've also been arming. They've been arming. That's just not true. That's just not true. They've been arming and supporting some of Jolani's enemies, the Druze and other people. So that's just simply not true, right? But I mean, let's move on, because I didn't want to go there, but you went there. But that's just simply not true. They are not arming Jolani's. They are often arming and helping and entrenching Jolani's enemies, or the people who would like to see him not in government.
They're using Jolani. They're using Jolani to do to Syria what they have always wanted to do. They wanted a weak state.
I think
leaders who could be pushed around.
I think there's so much misinformation that you just said there regarding that, which I don't even think we need to go into. They are clearly weakening the Syrian
officials are saying. He's a CIA asset.
I think it's more nuanced than that, is what I'm saying. Is that that Israel are definitely weakening the Syrian state by bombing it. Okay, let's move on. Let's move to China, right? Do you think China will come to Iran's aid in a more substantive way than it's come already, if this war continues?
I don't know. This is a decision for Chinese leaders. I think China realizes that if the Israelis and Americans are able to take over the Middle East, one reason they want to do that is to have leverage against China. We had this foolish senator, Lindsey Graham, saying this the other day, that they don't have leverage against China now. This tariffs didn't really work out. They want to have leverage against China. Chinese understand that. Whether that understanding would lead to helping Iran more, we don't know. That's their decision. What we know is that Iran has no other choice but to fight United States and Israel. And Iran fighting United States and Israel is good because the Syrian people will feel the heat if Iran falls. The Syrian people that were happy, as you said, about the fall of the Assad government, they will be in a much worse shape. They're not right now because Israelis are busy fighting Iran. But once they're done with Iran, then Syrian people, I think you're from Syria probably.
I'm not from Syria. I'm actually South African, but I mean, and yeah.
Good. But South Africa is good. They have a history of anti-apartheid history. This is good. They are doing a lot of good things. So viva South Africa.
Yeah. Final question, and thank you for your time. I mean, we've discussed Syria probably more than we hoped to, but what I want to ask is obviously the entire Gulf region, right? So Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait. Do you think that the strategy that the government's using at the moment is going to get them to flip against Israel and the USA, which I think is probably key for some sort of region which is not dominated by Israel or leaning towards Israel, or do you think your actions and the subsequent war is actually just going to entrench what I think is a very it's a relationship they don't want. It's a reluctant relationship they have with Israel.
These are independent countries. They make independent decisions. The hope that Iranians have is that they realize that the U.S. is not providing them with security. They're actually providing security to Americans. They got all these bases built with the promise of U.S. Protecting them, and they're protecting U.S. bases. They're shooting Iranian drones that want to hit U.S. bases. So I hope that the hope that we have is that they recalculate their policy towards the U.S., towards Israel, and we don't need U.S. and Israel to have a secure region. These countries with Iran can make sure that this region is secure. We don't need American and Israeli interference in this part of the world. This is the hope that we have, but these are independent countries. They make their own decisions.
Foad Izadi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.